Success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome. If you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. Associate yourself with people of good quality, for it is better to be alone than in bad company. Booker T. Washington. Not only was Booker T. Washington an influential higher education leader, author, speaker, and U.S. presidential advisor, but according to Dr. Paul Meacham, former CSN president, he was also the father of the community college. Booker Telephero Washington was born into slavery on April 5, 1856, in Hales Ford, Virginia, which is about 25 miles from Roanoke. His mother, Jane, was a cook at the tobacco plantation owned by James Burroughs. His father was an unknown man, likely from a neighboring plantation. They lived in a one-room log cabin, which housed the large fireplace that also served as the plantation's kitchen. Booker spent his earlier years hauling 100-pound sacks of grain to the plantation's mill and being periodically beaten for not being able to perform such arduous tasks. He was just a small guy, you know. All the while, he longed to sit at a desk as all the other children did at the nearby schoolhouse. After the Civil War, Booker and his mother moved to Malden, West Virginia, where his mother married. At 9 years old, Booker began to work at the salt furnaces with his stepfather, instead of going to school like he dreamed. His mother noticed his interest in learning and purchased him a book to help him learn the alphabet and to read and write basic words. He woke up every morning to study before he had to go to work. That was also about the time he took on his stepfather's last name of Washington. Washington, initially self-educated, had a first glimpse of school from about 1866 to 1868. Viola Ruffner, his employer's wife, saw something in him, and even though she was normally very strict with her servants, especially the boys, Washington's maturity, intelligence, and integrity helped her understand his desire for an education, and she started letting him go to school for an hour a day during the winter months. In 1872, Booker began an amazing journey, walking 500 miles. He supported himself along the way with odd jobs, finally arriving at Hampton Normal Agricultural Institute in Virginia, which is now known as Hampton University. Working as a janitor, administrators allowed him to attend the school, and after some time of working hard and paying his own tuition, the school's founder and headmaster, General Samuel C. Armstrong, offered Booker a scholarship. Armstrong was a strong supporter of freed slaves after having fought in the Civil War as a commander of a Union African American regiment. Having had a practical education, Armstrong became a mentor for Booker and influenced and strengthened Booker's hard work, values, and character of strong moral strength. After graduating with high marks from Hampton in 1875, Washington attended Wayland Seminary in Washington, D.C. for about 6 months. He then taught at Malden, Virginia, at his old grade school. In 1879, General Armstrong offered Washington a teaching position at Hampton University. And then, in 1881, the Alabama legislature approved $2,000 for a quote-unquote colored school. At that time, the government contributed very little for colored schools. Washington was chosen by Armstrong to run this newly approved school called the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute in Alabama. This was despite most people wanting it to be run by a white person. The school initially focused on training African Americans in agricultural pursuits. And classes began by being held in an old church. Washington traveled along the countryside to raise money not only for Tuskegee, but eventually to establish and operate hundreds of small community schools and institutions of higher education for African Americans. Here's a photograph believed to be taken outside of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, which was privately funded mostly by wealthy white Americans. This is a picture of Olivia Davidson Hall at Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute. Here's a photo of Booker T. Washington's home in Tuskegee, Alabama, during the time that he was a principal at Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute. Washington was married 3 times. Fanny N. Smith was his first wife from 1882 to 1884. After her passing, Washington married Olivia A. Davidson and was married to her from 1886 until 1889, when she also passed. Margaret Murray Washington was his wife from 1893 to 1915. Washington had 3 children from his first 2 marriages, Portia, Ernest, and Booker Jr. Between 1890 and 1915, Washington was a dominant leader in the African American community and came into national spotlight when he gave a speech in 1895. This was during the Atlanta Address. Washington encouraged the African American community to raise themselves through increased education and entrepreneurial enterprises. He was careful not to challenge the Jim Crow laws of segregation that existed in the South at the time. Having done so would surely have been a death sentence. Instead, he advocated for a go-slow approach as to not incur backlash. I've included a caricature that was drawn by John T. McCutcheon. At that time, there were many bits of literature and drawings and things like that were readily distributed and available throughout the public that encouraged and enforced Jim Crow laws and segregation. Booker T. Washington was the first African American to be honored with an invitation from President Theodore Roosevelt and visited the White House in 1901. Roosevelt's successor, President William H. Taft, used Washington as an advisor on racial matters. This was mostly due to Washington's acceptance of racial subservience. Although Washington outwardly promoted racial subservience and the go slow approach, he privately funded court cases fighting segregation and inequality. With over 1,500 students, 100 buildings, and 200 teachers and faculty members, there were 38 trades being taught, and Tuskegee became one of the country's leading schools with a $2 million endowment under the supervision of Washington. Booker T. Washington was the author of 14 books throughout his lifetime, including his autobiography, Up from Slavery. He said, "I will permit no man to narrow and degrade my soul by making me hate him." During his supervisory and principal position at Tuskegee, he instilled himself into the curriculum, including his values of patience, enterprise, and thrift. He remained the principal of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute until his death on November 14, 1950. He was laid to rest on the campus of this school, now known as Tuskegee University. Thank you for taking the time to learn about such an inspirational and innovative figure in history.